I really thought it was just going to be kid stuff, like we'd egg their doors, TP their boats, that kind of thing. And then Peter Pan chops off Captain Hook's hand and feeds it to a goddamn crocodile in full view of everyone. I was 9. My name is Timothy Cardwick, but people call me Slightly. I am 136 years old. Look pretty good for my age, don't I? Yeah, that'll happen when you're stuck on Never Never Land for 80 years. Like all the other Lost Boys, I was originally a kid from London. And one night, Peter Pan flew into my open bedroom window, which was very irresponsible of my parents. I mean, Jack the Ripper was like 5 years earlier, and they never caught him. But Peter and Tinkerbell flew into my window, and they were like, hey, you want to fly off to this tropical island where you never grow up and can be a kid forever? And I gotta be honest, my prospects weren't looking great otherwise. I mean, this was 1897 London. I was already working the early shift at the charcoal factory. So I was like, yeah, let's go to Neverland. Take me away from this industrial age nightmare. Biggest mistake of my life. Because here's the thing, when you get to Neverland, yeah, sure, it's great. Kids running around, there's no rules, but there's no running water, there are no toilets, there's no food. Do you know how malnourished you have to be to hallucinate food? There is no infrastructure aside from Pirate Cove. Oh, speaking of which, you will periodically be expected to fight a grown man who wants to kill you with a sword. If I'd known any of this, I would have told Peter to shove that pixie dust up his ass. But whatever, I've made my bed and now I gotta sleep in it. Oh, by the way, my bed is a used bird's nest. So the first 10, 15 years go by and it's fine, we're fighting pirates, but we're having a great life. Peter every year brings back a new Lost Boy, which is so awful the more you think about it. And then one year he goes off and he brings the Darling kids, Wendy, Michael, and John. And, we had some adventures. I loved hanging out with John. We were both Tottenham fans, so he was catching me up on the team. And then Peter's like, okay, I'll take you guys home now. Wait, what? We can leave? That's an option? But it was a courtesy he only extended to the Darling kids. And it was crazy because, the next year, Peter flies off, he brings back the Darling kids. And guess what? They get to leave again. When do I get to leave? So then one year, Peter comes up to me in the middle of the night, just wild-eyed, and he's like, I'm going to see Wendy, I'm getting a kiss tonight, and I don't mean that thimble shit. And then just flew off before I could even stop him. And that was the last I saw of Peter Pan for 30 years. I found out later from Tootles that Peter went to the Darling residence to go kiss Wendy, but she had aged, and Peter, physically shuddered, ha! 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 Like the total jerk that he is. And then he goes, oh, is that your granddaughter over there? I'm going to kiss her instead. And Wendy was okay with that? That little red feather in Peter's cap? Yeah, more like a giant red flag. Ladies, steer clear of Peter Pan. So anyways, back in Neverland, Peter's gone. And we had 30 years of peace? I personally negotiated an armistice agreement with Mr. Smee. Smee? Smee's me? Smee's me? Right, yeah. There was no point in continuing the hostilities between us pirates and the Lost Boys, what? So we drew up papers, Slightly signed his Johnny Hancock, I signed mine. We was mates. It actually changed our lives as Lost Boys, because now we could actually participate in the local economy in Pirate Cove. We sold our imaginary produce and our imaginary baked goods at the market, and we were able to buy supplies, clothing, actual food. What does imaginary Yorkshire pudding taste like? Nothing. It's imaginary. But we had to give those boys some food. They all had the scurvy. We thrived under that agreement. And then, politics. The political climate in Pirate Cove was very contentious. You had 3 separate pirate factions all asking, what would the world be like without Captain Hook? And the answer was, it would create a massive power vacuum, and anyone can snatch control. Blimey, the politics of it all. Of course, I was with the Hook loyalists, pretty much just me and the captain. Then there was the Labour Party, which was pretty much all the other pirates who we hadn't been paying. And then, of course, you had the Whigs. The Whigs? Oh, the Whigs weren't real. That was us. That was just 2 Lost Boys in a trench coat wearing a wig. But you had to wear a wig because, decorum rules at Parliament. It's kind of like a barrister thing. Oh, yeah, you gotta have a wig. Or mutton chops. So the captain thinks that the only way to maintain power is to have a big war. Bit of a wag the dog, innit? It was a total wag the dog scenario. Captain Hook needed to declare war on a boogeyman, someone he could blame all of Pirate Cove's problems on. And who's the biggest boogeyman of all? Peter Pan. It was a perfect plan. Peter was gone, so he was an imaginary threat that we'd never actually have to fight. But the Labour Party was like, you need to make good on your campaign promises, Captain Hook. We want a war with Peter Pan, what? So Bob's your uncle, off I go, and I kidnap Peter Pan's children. I wake up, and Peter Pan is standing in the middle of the Lost Boys hideout as a 40-year-old man wearing most of a tuxedo, and he says, you gotta help me. Someone took my kids in the middle of the night. And I'm like, oh, children have been absconded from London bedrooms in the middle of the night, and suddenly this is problematic for Peter Pan? And he's like, you don't get it. My kids are missing. I'm like, motherfucker, I'm missing. So Rufio comes in on his sailboard, skateboard, trolley car thing. Truth be told, you gotta keep Rufio on a fixed track. And he's immediately skeptical that this even was Peter Pan. I gotta be honest, I hated Rufio. Like, he'd been in Neverland for only 2 years when he became leader of the Lost Boys, and that's only because Peter had brought him to Neverland, like, right on the cusp of puberty. Like, he was just the biggest kid, and quite frankly, a bully. But it was Pockets who proved it was Peter by giving him a little mini facelift, and I gotta say, it worked. He looked years younger. So, it's clearly Peter. We decide, okay, saving kids from pirates, that's kind of our thing. We'll help you out. Tinkerbell fills us in that we've got 3 days to get Peter back into shape for battle. So he's got to hit the 3 F's. He's got to learn to fly, he's got to learn to fight, and he's got to learn to crow. Why was it important that he sound like a rooster? What was this?
And what was Bangarang?
Oh, your guess is as good as mine. I came out for breakfast one day and everybody was like, Bangarang this, Bangarang that. I'm like, what's Bangarang? And they're like, bah, Slightly doesn't know what Bangarang is, bah. They didn't know either. They just didn't want to be uncool. So we put Peter through a full training session. I'm talking PT. I'm talking half-pipe basketball. I'm talking sword fighting. I'm talking body painting. We even used the giant slingshot to try and help him fly. Oh, we was deathly afraid of that giant slingshot. Those Lost Boys don't know what kind of weapon of mass destruction they had on their hands. One shot and they could have torn our boats apart like angry birds. And I ain't talking about the harbor ladies. Anyways, none of the training was working. So then we're having dinner. Well, imaginary dinner, and Rufio and Peter got into it. I mean, as far as rap battles go, it was pretty weak, but when Peter landed that lewd, prude, rude, bag of pre-chewed food dude line, that was sick. So then all of a sudden, Peter was able to imagine again. Okay, that's a start. And then he can swing a sword. Okay, getting somewhere. God, looking back on it, most of the food we imagined was like just colored cake frosting. It was like, here, give me a sugary goo that'll keep me going. Except for Thudbutt, that guy knew what to do. Every night he had a massive burger and a giant wedge of cheese with his name and likeness carved into it. That guy knew how to live. Died tragically of high cholesterol at the age of 115, but you give me 115 good Thudbutt years, I'm not complaining. So Peter's good with his sword now, great, we can check fighting off the list. But now we gotta get his confidence up so we can fly. So we hatched the plan to steal Captain Hook's hook. He took Peter's kids, let's take his hook. I figured maybe we can even do like a prisoner exchange. We was trying to convince Peter's kids to love the captain. Maggie was clearly a lost cause and, quite frankly, irrelevant to the plot. So we focused on Jack, who got right quick with the Stockholm syndrome, and he had a bit of a penchant for American cricket. So we set up a game. The plan immediately came off the rails once Peter saw it was a baseball game. Apparently there was a big thing between Peter and Jack during the Santa series? They were playing Little League in December? Anyways, Peter needed to be like a dad for once, so he got really into the game, but then when he saw how much Jack loved getting attention from the rest of the pirates and Captain Hook, and once Jack hit the home run, I mean, he went full Stockholm Syndrome, and Peter was just despondent. Peter ran back to the hideout and tried so hard to fly, and then I guess Jack's home run left lower orbit and hit Peter right in the noggin and jogged his memory, which was great. Peter could remember his happy thought. He was able to fly, he was able to fight, he was able to crow, he was able to wear tights, the whole shebang. Even Rufio finally got on board. But it was weird because Peter's happy thought was the birth of his son Jack, and literally an hour later he's like, Peter Pan has kids? Maggie, by the way, total afterthought, not really important. She's off singing somewhere, I'm sure she's fine. So then Tinkerbell professed her love to Peter, and she somehow grew to be human-sized. She wrecked her home, and then quickly became a home wrecker. Okay, that's not fair to Tinkerbell. Tink had been in love with Peter for literally a century, and for years he was like, I'm into Wendy, I'm really into Wendy, I'm really into Wendy. Oh, Wendy's too old, I'm really into Wendy's teenage granddaughter. Like, Oh god, it sounds awful saying it that way. And plus, Peter had already cheated on his wife with the mermaids. Like, yes, I understand he needed oxygen, but those lips were lingering. And in Tinkerbell's view, the man you love is shown back up. He's a grown man who's not a pirate. Like, as far as options go in Neverland, like, she shot her shot. I get it. Like, I don't approve of her methods, but I get it. So Peter remembers his kids again after smooching Tink. And then he's like, okay, time for war. Let's go suit up. So I put on my armor. 1970s bamboo roll-up shades cut into the outline of my body. It is surprisingly effective. Peter flies aboard the Jolly Roger to start the fight, and I think he might have had too much cake frosting because he was sugared out. Right off the gate, just boom, drove his sword through the first pirate. And I was like, whoa, guess it's going to be that kind of a battle. Anyways, Peter gives the signal, bangarang, and we come out fighting. Egg to the face, adios muchacho. Slip it on gumballs, you ain't getting up from that. Tomato to the face, what, you're gonna let that stain set into your little puffy shirt? No, you gotta go home and do laundry, pal. 4-way paint gun to the eyes, hasta la vista, baby. But the best weapon in any fight against pirates? Eyeliner. You hit a pirate with a smoky eye and they are donezo. We kicked so much pirate ass. Thudbutt gets MVP for me. They see him rolling, they hate him. Anyways, Rufio, I guess, got into the colored frosting too, because he was amped to fight Captain Hook. And Peter stopped him, and then we hear this girl say, Dad, save me! And it's like, Maggie, my other kidnapped child. Right. You're still my happy thought, Jack. Jack didn't care. So off we go to rescue Maggie, and that's where we found the most horrifying discovery of all. She's being held with 5 other kids. Who the hell are these kids? And it very quickly went from Peter Pan's got kids to Captain Hook's got kids to Smiley Joe's got kids to Stinky Pete's got kids. Stinky Pete, ironically, went on to become the world's most famous sperm donor, but that's a completely different story. But then Hook goaded Rufio into a fight just by chanting his name. I mean, any man who can be goaded with a chant. So of course, Rufio tries to fight Hook. I thought Rufio had a chance when he got Hook with the looky looky I got hooky line. And I gotta say, his eyeshadow was on point. But Hook was a really good swordsman. Peter's like, no! No? Peter, this is war. Granted, we all look like children, but each one of us has 36 years combat experience against these pirates. But Peter Pan thought there was no way that we were gonna have any losses on our end. I know it's Neverland, Peter, but grow up. It was around then that Jack snapped out of his Stockholm syndrome, and he's like, Dad, let's go home. Hook makes a threat to go after Peter's family for all of eternity, which, wow, that's a damn good threat. So Peter's like, okay, let's fight. So there's a big sword fight, which leads all across town from the ship all the way to town square where the crocodile is, and we hit Hook with a ton of clocks. Where did we get those clocks? Did somebody go on a big Radio Shack run? Anyways, Hook loses his wig. Peter shows him mercy. Probably shouldn't have done that. Hook comes after Peter. Hook's hook gets caught in the gut of the crocodile. And then certain species of reptiles are known to enter a state of dormant hibernation, usually to survive winter conditions, with a heartbeat so slow they can easily be mistaken for dead. That giant crocodile was lying in wait for nearly 50 years until he saw a chance to finish his meal. And that was the end of Captain James B. Hook. Peter left Thudbutt in charge because he was bigger than everyone. Don't get me wrong, Thudbutt was a great leader, but that's an insulting reason to pick someone. Then Tink gave Jack and Maggie some pixie dust. Everyone said goodbye, and they flew away. And guess who got stuck digging Rufio's grave? Worst Christmas ever. It was another 3 years before I finally left Neverland. I'd saved up enough money to buy an 8-ball of pixie dust off of Tink, and I flew home. I returned home to a London I didn't recognize. Last time I was here, there were only 5 cars in all of England, and 3 of them belonged to the Queen. I have finally adjusted to life off of Neverland. It's weird being Britain's oldest pensioner, and yet I look and sound like a 40-year-old American. It doesn't always go over well.
Why do you have an American accent?
Well, I picked up a lot of American English from the pirates. Most of them were from New Jersey. Oh yeah, I'm originally from Bayonne.
You're from Bayonne, New Jersey?
Hell yeah, go fighting bees. There aren't any more Lost Boys in Neverland. We all eventually made our way back home. Don't Ask went on to coach professional basketball under his real name, Pat Riley. Pockets became one of the most respected plastic surgeons in all of California. You want work done, you go see a doctor. You want it done right, you go see Dr. Pockets. Thudbutt was the last to leave. He did reunite with his mother. She was in her 90s, but they still had a good few years together. I never saw Peter Pan again. And frankly, good riddance. That guy ruined my life.
One last question. Why was Tootles so much older than Peter?
Oh my God. That's the craziest story of all. So Peter was not the first Lost Boy to leave Neverland. Tootles was. Years before Peter stayed with Wendy's 13-year-old granddaughter, which I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. Tootles didn't fly home. He couldn't. He left his happy thought marbles with Thudbutt. So Tootles stowed away aboard one of the pirate ships as it was leaving port. The Santa Parada left Pirate Cove with 80 pirates on board and Tootles. When the Santa Parada ran aground in Curacao 5 years later, there was only one person alive on board. Tootles. Fast forward like 30 years. Tootles gets a job at Disneyland. They had just made an animated movie about our lives, and it was riddled with inaccuracies, some of which were really offensive. But they were working on the ride, Peter Pan's Flight, and they hired Tootles as a consultant to make sure it was more authentic and true to our story. One day he says, "Hey Walt, want to hear a story?" And proceeds to tell Walt Disney the story of what happened to him during those 5 years aboard the Santa Parada. This would later become the basis of the ride we know as Pirates of the Caribbean. Tootles' real name? Jack Sparrow. How's that for an E! True Hollywood story?